If you know me, you know how much I love and appreciate the classic 1978 slasher masterpiece by John Carpenter, Halloween. With that said, you can only imagine how happy this episode made me as we see my favorite character in Patricia facing her fears and becoming, by the end of the episode, a final girl who managed to survive and kill the boogeyman. Welcome back, everybody. Today we are taking a deep dive into episode 8 of Widow's Bay, which I'll just go ahead and say now is my personal favorite episode of the season so far. This episode was all about watching our lead characters getting rid of their baggage that they've kept away or either hid away, too afraid to face it, as they thought the curse was over, but boy, were they wrong. With that said, grab your boots and your tasers as we are here to break it all down, full spoilers ahead. The episode opens with a beautiful day in Widow's Bay after the curse-breaking showdown where Tom, Patricia, and Wick saved the town, or so they thought. We see our trios out enjoying a victory bite, and it's on Tom as Wick heads out and he tells Tom that he'll be seeing him around. Now, Patricia can't believe that it's finally over as Tom shares with her that he'll be taking his son Evan to the Red Sox game, making it his first time off the island, as the never let a land-born person leave the island is behind him now. Speaking of behind, did you all notice the Shadow Man picture behind them during this scene, which in my eyes sets up some major foreshadowing for later. Now at work, Tom walks in with a giant smile on his face as everyone is shocked to see him after recently going MIA. As Tom prints out those baseball tickets looking stress-free as Ruth fills him in on all the missed calls he's had as he tells her that everything's going to be okay. By the way, I have some thoughts about Miss Ruth that we'll be talking about later, and I can't wait to share it with you all. It's now nighttime and Patricia's at home and she's ready to enjoy some takeout with a glass of wine, but what happens next is just a small sign of the bad things to come for the very unpleasant evening she's about to have. Now, as she opens up her takeout, she sees that they've completely messed up her order. I'm talking about she ordered a chicken palm with a slice of coconut pie, which sounds delicious, by the way, but instead she got a turkey patty with no bun and a single sausage link. Whoever boxed up her order seemed to have done that on purpose, but she calls them and ends up trying to leave a helpful voicemail to whoever messed up her order, but unfortunately the mailbox was full, this being another example how she's always caring so much about others. Now, this episode was definitely more Patricia-centric, which in my eyes, the more Patricia the better because she is my favorite character, and I really want to highlight all her incredible scenes like all together. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about what's going on with Tom and Wick in this episode. Now we cut to Tom, who's at home now and excited to see his son Evan and show him the baseball tickets, but he finds Evan sitting in the living room ready to confront Tom about discovering those photos of him and his mom after being told his whole life that she died giving birth to him.
You went through the basement. No, I went through your trunk. What the hell is in the basement?
Evan gets straight to questioning Tom, leaving him with only telling him the truth. Now, Tom stands by saying that she did die giving birth, as he tells Evan that she was actually diagnosed with a preeclampsia-induced stroke, and she was never the same after. Now, that was the medical diagnosis, but we have been led to believe so far that it was the island's curse that led to Lauren being in the condition that she was in and end up dying, but I'm starting to question that. Tom goes on to explain her behavior and how she was not safe to be around, especially not to be around a newborn child. Tom had no choice but to put his wife in a home, which was his way of saying that he put her in a mental asylum. Now, Tom says that she did unfortunately die a few years later from a brain aneurysm. Now, I want to believe what Tom is saying is 100% true, but I have this small feeling that maybe she's still alive and maybe she's still in the asylum, and maybe Tom swore to himself to never let Evan see her in that condition. The reason I say that is because of what we learned of what happened to those who left the island back in episode 1. Remember the examples that Arthur shared with Tom? Take a listen to this clip, which comes from episode 1.
His cousin went to the mainland and died of a heart attack a month later. He also told me about a woman, what is her, Marcia Dogan, died of a stroke 8 years ago, a day after she stepped on the mainland.
So my question is, why did it take 2 years for Evan's mom, Lauren, to die of an aneurysm after almost leaving the island, whereas it took 1 day to a month for the others to die? Are you all smelling what I'm cooking here? Is it possible that there is more to this story? Is it possible that Lauren is still alive and Tom's keeping this secret from Evan and doing that to protect him? But as we get back to the scene, Evan isn't willing to let this go so easily as he goes on to read some unsettling letters from his mom after being committed. One of the letters talks about how people have two moms, and the one writing him right now is his secret mom, who's been kept a secret as she claims she's dead and it's too late to save her. Now, I don't want to take her saying there's two moms literally, but that's what we're here to do, and that's to dive into every little thing and analyze it. Now, I understand what she was getting at and the meaning behind the idea of two different versions of his mom after the incident. But again, I just have this feeling that maybe Tom is simply keeping a secret that the secret version of her is still alive. Now, after reading the last letter, Tom shows Evan old photos of his mom before everything happened, as we can see that she was wonderful and seemed to be a very nice person, as Tom says that Lauren wouldn't have wanted Evan to remember her in the condition that she was left in. Now, this whole scene to me highlights one of the key themes and the title of this episode. Tom has to confront and face his baggage of the secret he held from Evan for his protection. Now, Evan brings up not being able to leave the island, as this is where Tom shows him the baseball tickets, and he tells him that he can leave now, and Evan is shocked and couldn't be happier to hear the news. This to me was a great emotional moment between these two, because it's the first time we actually see them embracing each other, rather than going back and forth and going at each other's necks, as we see them share a hug, and Tom promises that from here on out, things will be different. Now, we'll be circling back to these two by the end of this breakdown, but the show has really been setting up the idea and the plot to where Evan's going to be set to leave the island at some point this season, and I'm just so curious to how that plot thread will end. Will the curse be over, or will there be a tragic ending for Evan and Tom? Now, before moving on, I did have some other thoughts in my mind in regards to this scene. First off, I do wonder if there is more information that we will be getting in regards to the relationship between Tom and Evan's mom, Lauren. So far, we know it took Tom some time to get Lauren to date him, and after 4 months into their dating, they got married, and she was already pregnant with another man's child. So my question is, why did they get married so quickly? Also, will Evan's real father identity be important to the story? If the island's curse is tied to bloodlines, this unknown DNA could be important. Now, speaking of family, what's the deal with Tom's family? We know from episode 2 that Tom's dad was the local and his mom was the one that lived on the mainland, but where are they now? Does Tom have any siblings? Are they still alive? Did his dad believe in the curse of the island as well? Also, a little throwaway line that was mentioned in this scene, and it wasn't never explained or expanded upon, but Tom initially thought that Evan had got those photos of his mom from the basement, but we know he got them from the chest in his bedroom, so now I'm curious to what's in Tom's basement. So as we move on for the rest of this breakdown, I just want to continue to point out the importance of the title, and again, that being your baggage, and just keeping that in mind and how that applies to our main characters. From Patricia's personal baggage with the trauma she carries from her past, Tom having his baggage with keeping the secrets of what happened to his wife from his son, and then there's Wick. Now, after sharing the story with Tom about what happened to his best friend Mark Doyle in last week's episode, we find Wick paying a visit to Jerry to free his conscience of his own personal secret that he's been keeping from her. Now, it's clear in the previous episodes that Wick definitely has a romantic connection and still cares for Jerry, and we found out that they actually dated when they were much younger in high school, but it is here that we find out that Jerry's actually spoken for and she seems to be happily married. Now, before meeting Jerry's husband, we see Wick wants to get something off his chest as he shows Jerry a picture of them in high school, and just as he's about to basically tell her that he's responsible for the death of her brother and the whole situation with the monster in the water, in comes her husband, who completely kills the mood as Wick ultimately doesn't tell Jerry the truth. Now, in the grand scheme of things so far, this seems to be not as important to the overall story because we just found out about this in the previous episode, but I am curious if this will carry over to the final 2 episodes of this season. Will Wick muster up the courage to tell his high school sweetheart the truth? And if he does, How will Jerry respond? She seems to know all the secrets of the town, so saying that a monster killed her brother probably wouldn't be so surprising, but finding out that Wick was responsible and kicked him off his leg will probably break her heart. So again, with it being mentioned in last week's episode and being mentioned here, I'm starting to think that it might be important to the overall story, or if this show gets a season 2, maybe this is being set up for later. But assuming this will be addressed between episodes 9 and 10, is there a world in which we see the sea monster that took Mark? Which, by the way, that particular creature might have been shown to us in episode 1, where the scene where Tom first met Arthur in the museum, there was a picture of a giant creature with tentacles underneath the ship, so maybe that's the monster that we're talking about. Or, since we know this island likes to play games with people, maybe Mark will return as like a zombie monster attempting to get revenge on Wick. Either way, let me know in the comments below if you all think that this story with Wick and Jerry will be important, and what do you all think will come of it? Now, as Wick leaves the museum, he notices that someone recently broke into a case that happened to contain the mask of the infamous boogeyman killer who has haunted countless people in the town since being cemented in his own basement all those years ago. As Wick is starting to get the feeling that the curse might not be over like they thought, as he immediately goes to the boogeyman's house and sees the door has been broken open from the inside. Which means, if the legend is true, the boogeyman once cemented in his own basement by the locals is now free, and the island has wakened him to finish what he started. The boogeyman is out to find the one person he wasn't able to kill the night of his original killing spree, that obviously being Patricia, as Wick immediately heads her way because her worst nightmare has come back. Which, speaking of, let's spend the next half of this breakdown focusing on the absolute highlight of my week, that being Patricia finally facing her past and morphing into the most badass final girl the island has ever seen. Now, after her disappointing dinner, we see Patricia's cleaning out her closet and she briefly looks through her yearbook as she hears her truck alarm goes off. Now, since episode 4, I have been wondering if the high school Patricia was the same kind of socially awkward, isolated person that we see today, or did the boogeyman event act as the turning point and that whole experience create this wall between her and the other locals like Chris and them not liking her. We watch as she heads outside to kill the alarm and notice she closed the door behind her, and if you look closely, you can see a bloody handprint on the hood of her truck. Now, as we're about to see, the alarm going off was the boogeyman's way to create a distraction to entering her home. As you also notice that when she goes back inside, the door is now wide open, but she doesn't take notice of either the handprint nor the open door as he's already in the house. Now back inside, she goes through the motions turning off the lights downstairs, but as she heads upstairs to go to bed, she hears a floorboard creak. She then notices that all the lights in the door was slightly closed, which is odd considering that the lights were on in her room and the door was wide open before she went outside to turn off the alarm. Now, as she gets closer to her room, we can hear that someone is breathing heavily from the inside of her room. Patricia looks like she has a sense of deja vu as she can sense something is off, and she slowly walks towards the stairs. Now downstairs, and before leaving, she gets her taser and she notices that it's only at 2% battery. Now, people always joke about how characters in horror movies or horror stories have the survival instinct of like a newborn baby, but I'm gonna need everyone at home to take notice of how she handles the situation. If you all are ever in her position, and if you feel like something's off, listen to your gut, y'all, which is what she told Shelby that she did back in episode 4 when she first encountered Boogeyman. She hid under her bed. Now, Patricia's back outside and she's trying to kind of maybe convince herself that maybe she's overreacting. As she stares into her bedroom window and hears a howl in the distance, she turns her head and that's when he steps out as she sees the boogeyman. This is where the episode became a full-blown Halloween slasher episode, and I was 100% here for it. We watch as Patricia is running, she's screaming, she's pounding on the neighbor's door, and in a classic horror fashion, no one's answering. Meanwhile, the boogeyman is just calmly chasing her down, looking to get the one victim that didn't end up dead the night that he murdered those 4 teenage girls. Now, during the chase sequence, we find Wick goes to Patricia's house and he sees the doors wide open and she's nowhere to be found. Patricia finds herself disturbing the book club night where her worst enemy, Chris, is in attendance. As Patricia charges her taser, she tries to quickly explain that the boogeyman is back. Now, obviously, we know the history between Chris and Patricia, so Chris doesn't believe her and brings up her line all those years ago about the boogeyman calling her and being the only sole survivor of the night of the murders. But it is here, like Tom, Patricia is forced to confronting and having to unload her baggage from her past as she admits that she lied about the boogeyman calling her.
I knew it.
Oh my God.
Didn't I say it?
You said it. You said it.
I felt left out. I told one person, they told everyone, and then I had to double down. But I swear to God, he came to my house that night, and I swear he's back.
But Chris still doesn't believe her. I'm such a big fan of Patricia. As I mentioned, she's my favorite character. But similar to my thoughts about Tom and Evan's mom maybe still being alive, is there a chance that Patricia lied about the boogeyman coming to her house that night? I mean, for him to return and immediately go straight to her house would say otherwise, that she is telling the truth. But I'm just saying, is there a possibility that she was maybe lying about the story, just playing devil's advocate for a second? Now, Chris yells at her and gets in Patricia's face, and she tells her it's not her fault that she doesn't have any friends because she's insane, and she hasn't forgotten what happened to her back in episode 4 at the party. But it is here that we get my second favorite moment of this episode, and easily the funniest moment to me, as Patricia finally steps up and she doesn't let the insult slide anymore and stands up for herself. And this is her standing up to one of the two people who have hunted her for years, as we see Patricia takes the taser and tases Chris and calls her the worst, which again, this whole scene was just hilarious to me. We see Patricia leave and she apologizes before she leaves, but when she heads outside, she looks up and sees the boogeyman staring down at her from the bedroom window before he jumps out of it. Now, if you needed more proof that this episode was basically a love letter to John Carpenter's 1978 Halloween, we watch as the boogeyman slowly sits up just like Michael Myers, aka The Shape, aka the boogeyman. Now, Patricia makes her one mistake of the episode as she trips over the taser cord and she hits her head on the concrete as the boogeyman steps over her. But before he can make his final move, we see he gets hit by a truck. Now, I'm not going to lie, this next scene was a little bit confusing to me as the paramedics arrive and Patricia wakes up and she wants to take the keys to run over the boogeyman, and she tries to warn them not to wake him up after being hit, which, by the way, we don't see who actually hit him. But as one of the paramedics wakes up the boogeyman, he slits his throat and the chase continues. Now, my confusion about this scene comes from, number one, who hit the boogeyman and why didn't we see them? Initially, I thought it was Wick trying to save Patricia, but if you notice, that's not his same truck that's in this scene. The other part that confused me was what happened to the women of the book club. Like, did they not witness the whole car accident and also a serial killer on the loose? Again, these are not like issues that I have with the episode. They're just like little nitpicks, little questions that came up that, like I said, just kind of confused me in the moment. Now, I do want to backtrack for a second because at this point in the episode, I wasn't entirely sure if only Patricia was seeing the boogeyman and if maybe the island was playing mind games on her, but it wasn't until we saw him cutting the throat of the paramedic that it was pretty clear that he actually was real. Now, at the gas station, things are about to literally heat up. Now, Bashir is inside getting some hot dogs and he's eating them inside because he said his wife is bothered by the smell, which is something you all should remember a little bit later as we find him not in his uniform for the first time all season after giving his notice less than 24 hours ago. Now, Patricia thinks quick on her feet as she runs inside and puts 20 on pump 3. The idea is to send the boogeyman back to hell and burn him alive with the gasoline. Now, the clerk and Bashir watch as she sprays the gasoline on the floor, and she eventually lights it up with the taser as the boogeyman is set on fire, but he continues to walk towards her. Now, the clerk runs outside and uses a fire extinguisher and immediately gets choked and tossed like 20 feet in the air as Bashir points a shotgun at the boogeyman but doesn't pull the trigger, and because of that hesitation, he gets stabbed in the stomach. If it wasn't clear already, 20 years ago, he wasn't able to be killed, and in this episode, we saw the boogeyman surviving jumping out of a window, he was hit by a truck, and now he's been lit on fire, and these being all signs that he's not able to be killed. Which, come to think of it, it makes me believe that maybe the man, before putting on the mask and becoming the boogeyman, maybe he made a deal with the island similar to Richard Warren. Whatever that deal was, again, whether you look at it as making a deal with the devil or making a deal with this demon of the island, maybe it was for him not to be able to die and to carry on with these murderous ways, and maybe he was possessed, which again is kind of similar to the Richard Warren situation, which will go to explain why the boogeyman was able to survive everything that was thrown at him. But as we go back to the scene and we see the boogeyman is about to kill Bashir, but Patricia takes a shotgun and shoots the boogeyman in the back. And this is where we get the best shot of this episode of her with the shotgun looking like Sarah Connor or looking like Laurie Strode as she shoots the boogeyman in the face, stopping him and ultimately killing him. Now again, after everything we saw the boogeyman survive in this night, how did a shot to the face kill him? Now, I've seen the theories in the comments section of how some of you all think that Patricia might be a witch, or even, as I suggested last week, maybe she's a descendant of the Warren, which is still unknown. But here's my best guess into why she was able to kill the boogeyman, and this is where I think the deeper understanding of the core of this episode comes in. So thinking about it like this, the island awoke the boogeyman to kill Patricia, knowing that this was the one thing she feared the most because, as we know, the island feeds off fear. So for her to defeat him, she had to not let her fears control her anymore. I kind of look at it like Stephen King's It, where Patricia overcame that fear, so she let go of the torment he had over her. And once she did that, the meaning behind the act and the ultimate defiance, and finally facing and conquering her deepest fear, that led to what killed the boogeyman, in my personal opinion. But let me know in the comments below if you all think there's another reason, besides just being shot in the face, that led to the boogeyman dying. But I talked about my second favorite moment of the episode, but here is my favorite moment of the episode, and maybe my favorite moment of television so far this year. Moving forward, I'm going to need to see every final girl and final guy and every horror story moving forward to take notes about this scene. We watch as Patricia, with the shotgun in her hand still, as she is holding it behind the dead boogeyman in the back of the ambulance, then at the coroner's office, and finally in the incinerator.
Is there another way out?
No.
Okay, thank you so much.
As those doors open, the boogeyman is now nothing but ash, making it impossible for him to ever return. Patricia faced her fears. She killed the boogeyman for good, and even better, no one can say that she lied this time around. I absolutely love this moment because yes, it was hilarious to number one see that she didn't leave his side with the shotgun behind him. I love that, to make sure he didn't return. Again, take notes at home from my horror fans out there in regards to final girls and final guy. Make sure they don't come back. But also love that it would appear that we will never know the motives or the identity of the man behind the mask. Normally, I would be frustrated. I love backstory. I love learning lore, but in reality, it really didn't matter. This was all about Patricia getting her life back, overcoming her fear, not only speaking up to Chris and tasering her, but also stop running from the boogeyman and facing him, ultimately killing him and killing that part of her life. It was just a brilliant and a true definition of a final girl. Now, as we come to a close of this episode, we see Wicks at the hospital to check on Patricia to make sure she's okay. But the peace doesn't last long because the news reports that there is a looming storm coming their way, and it's being titled the Storm of the Century. Remember that storm mentioned in episode 1? The one in 1786 where many were forced into the church and cannibalism ended up happening during what was called a deadly storm. Which makes me wonder, could history repeat itself? I believe the island is kind of working in phases, and maybe it's even upset after Patricia defeated the boogeyman and in return is sending the biggest storm their way, setting up the final 2 episodes to be absolutely terrifying. Now in Bashir's room, my theory of his wife being a ghost who he's been on the phone with this whole time this season finally gets debunked as we meet her, and she's very much real and very much alive and with him as he recovers from his stab wound. Now as Patricia checks on him, she notices that his wife is pregnant. We see that he's high on morphine, but he gets a little serious here as he asks Patricia what he witnessed tonight. Patricia, understanding the deeper horror of the island, tells him that he must leave town immediately. Because, as we know, their plan was to leave the island sooner rather than later, but we know that you also can't have kids on the island because they'll never be able to leave, and if they do, they'll die. Now, back at Tom's house, he tells Evan that while they're in Boston to see the Red Sox, they might as well go check out some colleges, as Evan is in disbelief because the reality of him getting off this island for the first time of his life is actually coming true. But Tom gets a knock at the door and it's Wick who tells him that the curse isn't over as the storm is coming. Now, the curse not being over confirms my theory from episode 7, that being that Richard Warren's bloodline lives on, leaving us to wondering who in Widow's Bay is a part of that bloodline. So, as I said last week, the painting where we saw little Frances surviving the boat accident shows that she continued her father's bloodline. Speaking of painting, it was brought to my attention in last week's breakdown in the comments section that the painting in the town hall of the woman and the man, that woman is actually missing a part of her finger, but also she's wearing the brooch that Sarah gave Frances in episode 6. So it's safe to assume that this woman in the photo is the older version of Frances, but now I wonder, who is that man? Like, is that the man who saved her in the painting? So let's now talk about the bloodlines, as I have some characters I want to throw at you all in regards to who I think might be a descendant of Richard Warren. I mentioned Patricia last week, but I'm going to eliminate her because why would the evil island send the boogeyman to kill her, knowing that that would end the curse? So let's go ahead and take Patricia off the board. What about Jerry? I feel like there's something important about Jerry, not only with the whole situation with her brother, but again, she knows all the secrets of the town because she works at the museum. So I wonder if Jerry might be a descendant. What about Wick himself? Talk about knowing everything about the town. Like, I would imagine he would know his bloodline, but maybe he doesn't. Could Wick possibly be related to the Warrens? Now, I also know that a lot of people predict that Evan could be related because we don't know that much about his mom. So Evan definitely seems to be a possibility, but I'm going to throw 2 more characters at you all. What about Rosemary? Again, another character that's very educated about the evils of the island, so maybe she might have some relation. But then here is my wild card character. What about Ruth? I know she's been used as like comedic relief for the show so far, but not to call out her age, but she is the oldest person in the show, and not saying that she is Frances, but I just feel like there's something with Ruth. I don't know, man. Like, I think that it could be a possibility that she could be a descendant of the Warrens. But what's going on, y'all? This is Elliot here. I just wanted to pop in as I was editing this video because it dawned on me as I was looking at the photo of Ruth. This makes me believe that she may be my #1 candidate of being a descendant, because that photograph that I just talked about of the older version of Frances and the mystery man, the brooch and the missing finger, she's standing in front of that photo, which makes me think that maybe this is a show foreshadowing and letting us know that she is the descendant of Richard Warren. So again, I might be totally wrong, but I just thought about that as I was editing this video. So let me know what you all think about my theory. Enjoy the rest of the video. Let me know in the comments below, who do you all think is a descendant? Have we met the character? Are they a main character? Are they a supporting character? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Now, before wrapping up this bloodline conversation, I will say whoever is a part of the Warrens bloodline, and let's say they find them in the finale or in next week's episode, what are they going to do next? How many of them remain, but more importantly, how will they end the bloodline? Will they have to kill them off to save the rest of the people of the island and releasing the curse? And one more little thing before we wrap up, I rewatched some of the previous episodes before watching this episode, and it dawned on me that the chamber that we know is hidden underneath the ground and has the closed doors and was underneath the Warrens' home and underneath the museum, obviously, that area has changed since we first saw it in episode 1, which makes me think, who's continuing the sacrifice? Because there's no more blood on the floor. There seems to be like some modifications made there. So is it safe to assume that who's ever maybe continuing on the ritual is part of Richard Warren's bloodline? Which again leads me back to Jerry, because she works in the Warren's house, which is now the museum. So again, something tells me that we should keep an eye on Jerry. But overall, I love this episode. What an incredible episode. Patricia's journey of her overcoming her fears was just brilliant writing, but also a brilliant performance. Like, she is so great in the show. I love that character. And of course, her doing the whole following the boogeyman until he got into the incinerator was just perfect. The stuff going on with Wick's secret, and of course Tom thinking that he can finally loosen the grip on Evan and let him experience life off the island. And of course we have all the unanswered questions resolving around his wife and all the stuff going on with the descendants. I say all that to say this was my favorite episode so far this season, and I just love the show so much. With all that being said, that will conclude my breakdown of Widow's Bay, Episode 8. I want to thank you all for watching or listening to this week's breakdown. If you all are watching this on YouTube, if you enjoyed this breakdown, hit the like button. It's free of charge. And when you all hit the like button, there's a hype button that you all can hit, which allows this video to get out in front of new viewers, which I would greatly appreciate that. Which also, speaking of new viewers, man, consider hitting that share button. Share this video with anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about this show just as much as we do. And also, share your thoughts in the comments. What did you all think about this episode? Is it your favorite like mine? What did you think of the boogeyman, Patricia's journey, Wick's situation? What's going on with Tom? What thoughts, what theories, what deeper meanings did you all take away from this episode? Let me know in the comments. And last but not least, if you're having a good time, I hope you are, consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel today. If you are listening to this via podcast, Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or wherever you all get your podcasts from, please leave your thoughts on the episode in the comments below and consider following the podcast. And I would love it if you all can give me a 5-star review. Alrighty, y'all, we got 2 more episodes left to find out the secrets of Widow's Bay's Island. But I want to thank you all again. Don't forget, you all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next breakdown.